tea was still warm. He made it for me, just like always. One sugar, no milk. It sat between us on the table, steam rising. No words. We weren't fighting. That's the part that confuses people. It wasn't cold. It wasn't dramatic. It was just quiet. But not the peaceful kind. The kind of quiet that clings to your skin like damp air. The kind that feels like something should have been said, but never was. I stared at the cup. My hand didn't move. His fork did, though. 3 bites, no eye contact. And suddenly my shoulders remembered something my mouth didn't. They tensed, like they were bracing for a storm that never came. Like they'd been carrying a weight I never gave them permission to hold. I used to think silence was safe, that if I said less, I'd hurt less, that if I made myself smaller, softer, easier, someone would meet me there. But now it just feels like I disappeared without leaving. There's this pressure behind your chest that builds, not like a scream, more like a question, the kind you don't even know how to ask. Like, do you even see me sitting here? Would you notice if I didn't come home tonight? If I spoke, would it even land? I don't think he noticed my hands were shaking. Not wildly, just enough that I kept them under the table. The funny thing is, I rehearsed what I wanted to say. Earlier in the shower, I even practiced how my voice would sound if I brought it up casually. Hey, can I tell you something that's been on my mind? But then the moment came, and it didn't feel casual. It felt like too much. So I swallowed it again. Sometimes I think the body holds our grief better than we do. It doesn't ask for permission. It just remembers. Through clenched jaws, stiff necks, shallow breaths. I didn't lose my voice. I buried it. Under every moment I told myself, this isn't the right time. Don't ruin the mood. You're probably overthinking it. But it's not overthinking when your heart skips for silence. It's not dramatic when the quiet feels like rejection. It's not too much to want to feel heard. He looked up for a second. Our eyes met. He smiled, small, safe, and went back to eating. I wanted to ask him, not even about us, not about feelings, just something, anything, like, how did you sleep? But I didn't, because I already knew he'd say, fine. And I'd say, that's good. And the air would fill with politeness, not presence. The tea cooled. There's something so heartbreaking about a warm gesture going unnoticed. Like he tried, in his way, and I couldn't meet him there because I was waiting for a language he didn't speak. Maybe he thought the tea was enough. Maybe it was all he had to give that night. And maybe I wanted more than kindness. Maybe I wanted connection. But here's the thing no one tells you. You can sit across from someone you love and still feel like you're slowly disappearing. I started tapping my foot without realizing. A soft rhythm, not out of impatience, and just to remind myself I still had a body. Silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's packed tight with every word we were too scared to say. And in that moment, my body, not my voice, spoke first. A sharp inhale, a stiff exhale, shoulders tight, eyes tired, throat dry, not from thirst, but from all the I miss yous that got stuck on the way out. I looked down at the tea, steam fading, gesture made, message missed, and I thought, is this how we slowly lose each other? Not in fights, not in betrayal, but in silence that pretends to be peace. He reached for his phone, scrolled, paused, laughed at something. I didn't ask what it was, I just smiled, half smile, autopilot, because sometimes it feels easier to play along than to interrupt the silence with something as fragile as truth. The tea was cold now. I picked it up anyway, held it. Didn't drink, just needed to feel something warm in my hands, even if it didn't make it to my mouth. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, eyes open, listening. Not to sounds, but to the space between them. The hum of the fridge, the click of the heater, the inhale of the city outside. And underneath it all, the silence that had started breathing before I even noticed. Sometimes I wonder, if silence could speak, what would it say? And sometimes, I wonder if mine ever will. I tried once, to explain, to finally say something real. We were sitting in the car, parked just outside the grocery store. Clouds overhead, engine still running. I don't remember what started it, but I remember how it ended. I said, I don't feel seen anymore. He blinked, tilted his head a little like he was reading instructions in a language he didn't study, and then he replied, I always tell you I love you. As if that was the answer. As if a sentence could undo months of feeling invisible. I wasn't mad, just tired. I tried again, slower this time. I know you care, but sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing. Right here, beside you. And he looked confused, like I'd handed him a puzzle with half the pieces already missing. He said, "Oh, well, that's not fair. I'm doing my best." And maybe he was. But in that moment, what I heard wasn't love. It was defense. It was a door slowly closing with a soft click. That night, I lay on my side, back to him. Same bed, same two bodies, but something had shifted. I'd finally tried, but it didn't land. Since then, I stopped explaining, because there's a kind of ache that comes not from being ignored, but from being misunderstood while trying your hardest to be honest. It makes you question your voice, makes you wonder if the way you feel is too much or just too hard to translate. I tried, but they heard drama. I tried, but they heard blame. I tried, but they heard something I never meant to say. So I learned to say nothing. I started carrying my feelings like groceries with broken handles, trying not to spill, trying to make it to the door without making a scene. And the worst part? You still hope they'll notice. That maybe he'll ask, "Hey, is something off?" But they never do, because you've taught them that you're fine. Taught them that a soft smile means you're okay. That a silent dinner doesn't mean disaster. It just means you're tired. And maybe you are. But not from the day, from holding everything. The tea on the table is cold now, still untouched, still full. Just like the last conversation I tried to have. I looked at it yesterday. The way the cup curved inward like it too was keeping something. A warmth it never got to give. It reminded me of myself. We underestimate the violence of being unheard. Not in shouting matches, not in slammed doors, but in soft moments where you open up a little and they miss it entirely. It doesn't shatter you, it dissolves you. So you get quieter, not bitter, not cruel, just quieter. You talk about the weather, you send memes. You ask how work went, but you stop saying, "I had a weird dream last night and I don't know why it scared me." Or, "I'm not okay and I don't need a fix, I just want to be held." You stop sharing the blurry thoughts, the small worries, the midnight fears, and that's when the real silence begins, not in the mouth, but in the space between your heart and theirs. I caught myself the other day, laughing in a room full of people, and suddenly realizing I didn't remember what I was laughing at. It wasn't fake, but it wasn't joy either. It was habit, because when you're not understood, you become fluent in survival language. You say what they'll respond to. You become who they can digest. Not too messy, not too emotional, not too real, just convenient. And you hate yourself a little for it, but you also feel safer. Because if they can't meet the real you, why keep handing it over? He made tea again this morning. Same mug, same silence. And I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because I didn't want to try again. Not today. Since that moment in the car, I've replayed the conversation like a voicemail I never finished. Try to edit my words, make them easier, softer, but the truth is, it wasn't the words, it was the distance. Some people listen like they're waiting to reply. Others listen like they're waiting to leave. And then there's the silence that listens with no space at all, just presence. I miss that kind. I miss the version of us where, "How was your day?" meant something, where my silence was a question, not a routine. But now it's just what we do. We sit, we eat, we scroll, we sleep, and everything I wanted to say has found a new home. In the way my body tenses when he walks past me, in the way I hesitate before sharing, in the way the tea cools beside me. I didn't stop speaking because I gave up. I stopped because I ran out of ways to say the same thing without breaking myself open. And maybe one day someone will hear what I never got to say. But for now, I stay quiet. Not because I have nothing to say, but because every time I did, I came back colder. I wake up. Phone lights up. 3 unread messages, 1 from a friend. "Hope today's not too crazy." I reply, "Just the usual chaos. How about you?" Add a smile emoji. Send. Turn over. Exhale. It's early. The room's still half dark, but I've already started performing. Throughout the day, I say the right things, ask the right questions, use the right tone. I know the script. Most of us do. "Morning. Yeah, I slept fine. Work's been non-stop lately. Can't complain." And my favorite, the grand finale. Talk soon, but we never do, not really, because soon isn't a time. It's a way of saying, let's keep pretending we're still close without getting too close. I walk into work. Someone passes me in the hallway. You good? I nod, say always, but I'm not. Not always, sometimes not even halfway. Still, I smile, because saying I'm tired opens a door I don't have the energy to walk through, because saying I feel disconnected makes people uncomfortable. And the last thing I want is to be a burden dressed in honesty. So I speak in code, not because I'm fake, but because the real version of me, she gets misread, or worse, ignored. The strangest part? I don't even know when the performance began. It just slowly became the only way I knew how to be around people. I say, I miss you, only when I'm sure they'll say it back. I ask, are you okay? More than I answer it truthfully myself. I laugh at jokes I don't find funny, because silence feels rude. And when someone says, you seem so put together, I say thank you, and try not to cry. That's the thing about rehearsed silence. It's not empty. It's full of everything you didn't say, everything you wanted to scream, but translated into small talk. Even the way I say goodnight now feels scripted, a soft sleep well sent out of habit, not emotion. There was a moment last week, someone I care about asked, are you okay? And the way they asked it, it cracked something. I wanted to say, no, not really. I feel invisible in rooms full of people. I feel like I'm fading in conversations that once made me feel alive. I feel like I'm saying things to keep the peace, but losing myself one syllable at a time. But instead, I smiled, said, yeah, just tired, and changed the subject. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I've built this version of myself that's easier to digest. I joke, I deflect. I summarize my feelings into short sentences that end quickly, so no one has to linger in discomfort. It's not lying, it's surviving. There's a performance to being fine. You learn the cues, the pauses, the laugh at the right time, the head tilt when someone else speaks, the perfect when they pause so they feel heard, even when you don't. And the worst part? You start believing the script. You forget what your unfiltered voice sounds like. You forget how to answer without measuring what they'll hear. You forget how to cry without muting yourself. Sometimes I stand in front of the mirror, brush my teeth, look myself in the eye, and wonder, who am I performing for? Because I've said, I'm okay so many times, my reflection doesn't even flinch when I lie to it. There's a version of me that sits at dinners, nods politely, asks about the dog, laughs at the appropriate moment, and gets complimented on how present I am. But I'm not there. Not really. I'm somewhere between what I'm allowed to feel and what I've been trained to say. Even my silence isn't quiet, it's rehearsed. It waits for the right timing. It shows up only when it won't scare anyone. It knows its role, and it plays it well. I used to think silence meant withdrawal, but now I know sometimes it's the most practiced thing we do. I carry it like a second skin, smile with it, work with it, say goodnight with it, and the tea, still there, still full, still cold, untouched. Not because I forgot it, but because I didn't want to drink something that didn't feel like mine anymore. That cup used to mean comfort. Now it's just a prop in the scene I keep repeating. I want to be heard, but only if they hear me right. And that condition, that's the real cage. So I keep saying the right things, keep answering like I'm supposed to, and somewhere behind my eyes, I hope someone notices the silence isn't real. It's just a mirror, polished, practiced, and aching to crack. The body knows when a sentence gets buried, it tightens, just a little at first. Jaw clenched, shoulders rise. Breath gets shallow, like your chest forgot how to open fully. You learn this language of suppression, not all at once, but slowly, like learning to flinch before you even hear the thunder. A sore throat that lingers, but there's no cold. Just words, stuck, unsaid, unasked, unwilling to cause discomfort, so they sit quietly and turn into tension. There's a drawer in my chest, it's full. Letters I never wrote, texts I typed, then deleted. Sentences that made it to the back of my tongue, but not past it. That's where my voice lives now, inside that drawer, tidy, labeled, but unopened. You want to speak, you do, but the moment doesn't feel safe, so you tell yourself, later, but later never knocks, and the drawer stays closed. I remember once someone asked me, what's wrong? And for a second, I thought about telling them, Not just the surface stuff, but the soft ache that had been humming under my skin for weeks. I opened my mouth, then closed it and said, "Ma, nothing, just tired." That sentence has ended more truths than I can count. Sometimes I wonder how many versions of me have died in those moments. Not with a bang, by a swing, but with a shrug, a breath, a redirect, a polite smile that says, "Don't worry about me, I'm easy." I wanted to say, "I feel like I'm fading in my own life." I wanted to say, "Every day I feel like a guest in rooms where I used to feel at home." I wanted to say, "I don't know who I am when I'm not performing comfort for everyone else." But I didn't. Because being misunderstood hurts worse than being silent. Because once, when I did open up, it didn't land. And I never forgot the feeling of saying something raw. And hearing, "Oh, well, everyone feels that way." Like my pain wasn't special enough to hold space for, so I stopped bringing it up. And maybe you did too. Maybe you had a moment where you tried, where the words reached your throat, but froze there, waiting for permission that never came. Now, you've adapted. You speak in service. You ask how others are doing. You nod when you don't agree. You laugh when you want to cry. You text, "I'm good," while rereading that same conversation for the 5th time, trying to figure out if you said something wrong. You learn the skill of holding it in, and no one rewards you for it. But they sure find you easier to love that way. I wanted to say, that joke actually hurt. I don't feel close to you anymore. I wish you'd ask how I'm really doing, but I didn't, and no one asked again. So silence became familiar, predictable, safe, and sometimes, even when you want to open the drawer, you realize you've forgotten what you were going to say. Not because it wasn't important, but because the version of you who felt it had already folded herself small and left the room. The tea, it sat for days, cold, still, eventually forgotten, until one day. I poured it down the sink. Not in anger, not in drama, just quietly. The cup was clean again, but I wasn't. I stood there, staring at the empty mug, and I thought, this is what my voice has become. Something I prepared for someone else. That never got tasted. And now it's gone. I wanted to say, so many times I've almost been honest. Almost, but I didn't. And yet, the wanting to speak, that still lives. Like breath on glass, faint, but real. It means I'm not fully gone yet, and neither are you. Because even if the drawer stays closed, even if the words stay stuck, even if your voice hasn't been heard in years, the wanting, that's still a kind of aliveness. The ache to be known, it hasn't left you. You still pause when someone asks, "How are you?" You still look in the mirror and imagine what it would sound like to finally say the thing that's lived in your chest for too long. You still hope, maybe next time, the silence will break itself. You still want to be real, and wanting to speak is still a form of speaking. So even if no one's listening yet, even if the words haven't formed, even if your voice is quiet, I hear you. You're still here. It started while brushing my teeth. Nothing big, no loud crash, just a tremble in my fingers, then in my knees, like my body remembered something I didn't give it permission to say. I gripped the sink. The mirror didn't move, but the version of me inside it did. She looked tired, not the kind that sleep fixes, but the kind that silence builds. That night, I didn't cry. I couldn't, but my body did it for me. The breath got stuck halfway, not blocked, just lost. My chest didn't rise like it usually does. It pressed inward, like it was trying to disappear from the inside out. No warning, no name for it. Just the kind of stillness that makes sound feel too loud. Even my own toothbrush felt like a scream, so I stopped brushing. And I sat on the edge of the tub, with mint on my tongue and tears behind my eyes that never came out. This wasn't burnout. It wasn't a bad day. It was my body finally trying to say the things I never could, like how I flinched when someone raised their voice. Not because they scared me, but because I've lived too long pretending I was okay with that tone, or how my shoulders ached every morning. Not from my pillow, but from the weight of all the words I swallowed the day before, or how my jaw tightened in traffic, at work, even during small talk at lunch, because pretending to be fine takes muscle. They call it stress. I think it's just unspoken grief that hasn't found its way to language yet. Sometimes my chest feels heavy for no reason, but there's always a reason, even if I can't name it. I hold my breath when I read certain texts. I clench my fists when I hear specific songs. I pace while waiting for replies that don't come. The body remembers, and not in dramatic ways, but in the little ways that go unnoticed. The twitch of a leg, the tingle in the fingertips, the dry throat before you speak a truth and decide not to. I used to think I was overreacting, being sensitive, too emotional. But now I realize I wasn't dramatic. I was carrying too much in silence for too long. There's this mug I always go back to. I don't drink from it anymore, but I hold it just to feel warmth in my palms, just to remind myself. Some things don't need to be filled to be comforting. That mug knows. It's been through a lot. So have I. Sometimes I wonder how many of us are walking around with stiff necks and tired eyes, not because we slept wrong, but because we're surviving right. Right enough to keep going, but not soft enough to feel it. And the body gets louder. A skipped heartbeat, a sudden wave of heat, a cold sweat at a perfectly normal dinner. It's not malfunction, it's memory. Your body isn't betraying you. It's the only part of you that's been honest this whole time. While your voice smiled, your stomach twisted. While you nodded, yes, your spine leaned back. While you said, I'm fine. Your breath stayed shallow. It's a language most of us were never taught to listen to. But it's there. It's in the way you stretch your neck after a long conversation that drained you. It's in the sigh you let out after holding a boundary. It's in the sudden urge to nap after being around someone who doesn't see you. It's not weakness, it's signal. And maybe we don't need to decode it. Maybe we just need to stop shaming it. You're allowed to be exhausted by what you never said out loud. You're allowed to feel pain in places no one touched. You're allowed to shake while brushing your teeth and call that a kind of crying, because it is. I held the mug again tonight, not to drink, just to warm my hands, to remind myself that I can still feel something. And as I sat there, quiet, still, with toothpaste on my lips and tension in my chest, I heard it. Not a voice, not a sentence, but the body whispering through every ache, every shallow breath, every flicker behind the eyes. This body remembers everything my voice was too scared to say. This time, I whispered instead of swallowing it. It wasn't loud, not even clear, just a sound that escaped before I could tuck it back inside. I don't think I'm okay. That's all I said. To no one, really. Just the air. The sink. Maybe to the version of me that never got the chance to say it when it mattered most. And the world didn't stop. No one ran. No one asked if I was being dramatic. Nothing broke except maybe the silence. A little. It's strange how something so small can feel like a revolution when you've been quiet for years. I used to think healing looked like transformation, like glowing skin and yoga breath and clean white rooms with plants that never died. But maybe it's more like sitting in your own mess, owning it and saying, I still belong here. Maybe healing isn't about sounding strong. Maybe it's about finally telling the truth, even if your voice shakes. There was a moment earlier. The light was pouring in sideways, one of those 6 p.m. golden hours that makes everything look softer. I sat by the kitchen counter, nay, same spot, same mug. But this time, I drank it, not for them, not to pretend, not to fill a space, just to feel warmth go down my throat, to remind my body that something kind could still move through it. It was cold by then, but it still counted. I think that's what this is. The small things that still count. The things you do quietly that no one claps for, but still change everything. Like pausing before you answer, I'm fine, and asking yourself if that's true. Even if you still say it, you checked in, and that matters. Like letting a sigh out, the deep kind, the one that says, that was too much for me, even if you never say it out loud, or turning the music down because the noise inside is already enough. These aren't declarations, they're returns to yourself, to what's honest, to what's enough. I used to measure my worth by how much I could hold without breaking. Now, I think it's by how softly I can put things down. You don't have to scream to speak. You don't have to explain to be real. You don't have to make someone else understand to know that you're telling the truth. And if it's only your own ears that hear it, that still counts, that's still valid. I think about all the versions of me that stayed silent when they wanted to speak. All the laughs I forced, the nods I gave, The times I said it's nothing when it was everything. And I forgive them. They weren't fake. They were scared. They were trying to stay close to people who didn't know how to hold the truth. And I get that. We perform not because we're dishonest, but because we're loyal to connection, even if it costs us parts of ourselves. But I think, no, I know, there's a kind of connection that doesn't ask you to shrink, that lets your full self enter the room, awkward, messy, barely held together, and still enough. And if you haven't found it yet, start here, with you. With the quiet space between your inhale and your exhale. With the text you didn't send, but wrote, with the hand that held the mug. Not to impress, just to feel something. Healing doesn't ask for performance, only presence. You don't need a perfect voice, you need a real one that says, I'm scared, I'm tired, I'm still trying. One that says, I matter, even when I'm not understood, even when I'm not clapped for. I finished the tea tonight. Same mug, same silence. But it felt different, like the quiet was finally mine. Not a prison, but a place to rest. And I think that's what this has been about all along. Not being heard by them, not being fixed, just hearing myself again. Even if the words are soft, even if the sentence isn't finished, even if no one else is listening, maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. And if you're still holding something in, maybe this is your sign to whisper it out. Not for them, just for you. If this spoke to a part of you, let it sit, or share it so someone else feels less alone.